My name is David Mahoney. I am by training, but right now it seems like what's taking up most of my time is fixing a 120-year-old house. There there was a lot of differences. So he came to America in 1918. So that must means he probably started his journey in what, like 1917. So Blagorodavac is a very, very small town. It's like what, 10 houses or something like that. Right. When I was coming to Croatia, right, I could do research, right? I could say, okay, this and that. But I was thinking, just imagine the courage it took to hop on a horse, right? Go to a boat to where all you hear is, oh, there's this country out there that's good, and that's basically all you know, right? And you're traveling on a horse for I don't know how long. You're on a ship for what, probably 2 months, 3 months. You get off in New York City and you don't know anybody, right? Because he came by himself and he was like 18 or 19. And they're just like, right? So in my mind, he had it a lot harder than I had it. Just that first journey alone to get there. Not even what happens when you get there. And 1918, right? So he was in New York not for a long time, and he went to Minnesota. That's where he settled, and that's where he met his wife, and they've had, I think, 7 children. So even back then, right, from 1918 to Minnesota, even that's a long trek, right? To get from there to there and then settle in Minnesota. And I wish I would like, why did he choose Minnesota? Like, but if you, from what I was able to gather from um documents and stuff like that, through he was a car repairman, so he fixed stuff, right? And his father was a blacksmith. And then you go down the line. Um, grandfather was an engineer. My father was an engineer. I am an engineer. So I mean, the line of it, we've been fixing stuff for a long time. you know, like me, he was cars. Grandfather, his father was metal. My father was a nuclear engineer, and me, I'm a computer software engineer. So it's fixing just in different types of things. I kind of wonder how he was greeted when he came here, because in general back then, when it didn't matter, you were Irish, Croatian, immigrants weren't treated the best when you got to the States. They gave you the worst jobs, they gave you, everything. So it's to me, it must have took immense courage to do it. Because right now it's 14 hours. Back then it was months, and months that you had no clue of what you were going into. You did, it was like cross your fingers and hope for the best, right? And because if you got there, or when you got there, you probably used the majority of your money. So there was no, oh, I don't like it, I'm coming back. If you didn't like it coming back, maybe what, 10 years, 20 years, and they stayed. And I I wish I would have got to ask him why he didn't teach my grandfather, you know, uh, well, my grandmother in this case, Croatian. But when I talk to my grandfather, for example, when he was alive on my mother's side, he's where the Irish is. And he said when you came over, you kind of you didn't want to show where you were from. You kind of just wanted to kind of blend in. So that was probably the reason. I think I had it a lot easier than he did. A lot easier. I have Google Translate. Like if worst comes to worst and I need to communicate with somebody, I could open up my phone and do Google Translate, right? I have Google Maps, right? Where am I going? Put it into my phone. Okay, it tells me how to get there, right? All these things, right? I when I think about it, when I think about my kids, right? And I think about stuff that they would never, they will never see that I grew up with, like a phone, where a rotary phone. What they have no idea. Or, I mean, yes, we teach them how to use a map, but will they ever use a map? Probably not, right? Memorizing your friends' phone numbers. Now you just put it into your, right? You just put it in and say, okay, forget about it. Between, I mean, 1918 to now, I mean, yeah, over 100 years, but I mean, human race has come a long way in 100 years. We did. So when we went, we were going to, maybe go to a cafe, get some coffee, but there is nothing in Black Rotovats. There, like, when you drive in, you see the sign, and then you blink, and then you're out. We drove down to Main Street. There wasn't any stores. There was like five houses or so, and excuse me, that was it. There was nothing else. And so that's we were that's when we were driving to Osijek. And so we drove out because I wanted to see it, but like the there was nothing there. It didn't even look like people still lived in the town because I mean there were like I said a couple of houses, but it didn't look like anybody lived in them for a very long time. I mean, we only drove through it because there wasn't any place to even stop, right? It was like it's maybe five houses, and then but there wasn't, all the houses looked abandoned. I read the
Excessive.
part of where he was a blacksmith, and that my great grandmother was very strict, and that was basically all I got. I didn't I had trouble reading the rest, which I will get to eventually once this house is done and I actually have time to sit down and read it. It would be my great great grandfather, Martin.
Yes.
He was the blacksmith. Yeah, from Ben. I asked him, he had none. He actually asked me if I had any. I was just like, I was, uh, no. I was hoping you might. Did you have any from that time or no? Well, I do have a picture of Frank, but from the naturalization, if you want that. I'll have to find it and I'll send it to you. It's just a
Today.
small black and white picture. what you guys
Well,
do is incredibly important, right? Now, you guys deal with history. That old saying, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Right? I think everybody at a certain point in life wants to know where they're from. Like when you're younger, you're like, you don't care so much. But when you get older, you kind of want to know, where you came from and this. And the archives play a huge role in that because, right, reaching out to you and you giving me the book, I had no idea my great great grandfather was a blacksmith, right? And the little tidbits about the town that he lived in and all this stuff to me is very important, right? It people need to know where they're from, right? For example, my grandmother, um, my my grandmother, my mother's mother, we have no idea where she's from. And like so I know where my grandfather was from, I could trace that tree, but on my grandmother, it ends with her. We have no idea. Archives are very important because it's a place where you can learn about what happened, right? When you think about things now, right? You get your birth certificate, right? You do census, right? And you think these things aren't important because you don't think you're like, oh, but they are. They're very important because in 100 years from now, somebody will, call the archives. Where was Dave Mahoney? Maybe my great great grand, you know, and they want to know. Oh, he came, Castel Campbellovat's. He stayed there with his family, lived in this house, right? That's important, right? Without somebody to be the gatekeepers and have these books and keep them and digitalize them so people can search, right? That's a big thing, right? Because that book where you found Frank's birth certificate, right? Once all those things are digitalized, people will be able to just search, right? And find these things. And without what the things that you do and your team does, it wouldn't be possible, right? And that goes for like um all countries, the United States too. Like you see people see these things as like an inconvenience. Oh, census and all. And it's not until you start to realize. I have to say, maybe there's some people who realize these things younger than I have. How important these things are. Um, but all these things are very important because in 100 years, when somebody my great grandchildren might be like, where did I come from? And want to know about Becky and want to know about Duncan and Joelle and how, they could be, who knows where they'll be then, hopefully here, but who knows? They'll want to know their heritage. I want them to know you are Croatian, right? They will know that, and my grandkids will know that, right? They will live by the sea. Fingers crossed. I mean, it was up to me. My kids will live with me forever, but you know, it's very important. You can't understate how important it is to be able to search history and the roots of people, right? Marriage certificates, and then fast forward, 100 years, it becomes really, really important.
yeah,
It's things that people don't realize, and then you know you realize that you do need it, and you're really glad that it's there.